afternoon, everyone, and welcome to PBA at noon. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Sophie Caesar. It is not every day we have companies that are on the cusp of going public. These stories offer our viewers the opportunity to invest early should they choose. Joining us is Electro Metal and Mining CEO, Daryl Hodges.
Welcome, everyone. A little bit about Electro Metals. Their corporate strategy is to develop projects in copper, nickel, zinc, and precious metals that's going to feed the increasing demand for these metals. They're focusing on projects with a clear path to potential cash flow. Electro Metals has signed an LOI with a TSX CPC and is currently seeking funds to advance its high potential copper, zinc, and silver gold project in the prolific Rouyn-Noranda area of Quebec. Welcome, Daryl. Free field to start when you're ready, and we'll take questions from our audience once you finish your presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, Sophie, and thank you, Paul. And thank you, everybody that's taking the time to join in. I'll just do the share screen now and pop up the presentation. There we go. And again, thanks very much. As Sophie said at the outset, the purpose of this company, which we created, was to basically, obviously, feed into the base metals, critical metals for the future, particularly electric vehicles, et cetera, with the copper and base metal focus. And secondly, what we did not want to do was become a junior company that was out exploring and coming back to the market, exploring and coming back to the market with, painfully slow returns from drilling. So we wanted to focus on projects that have known resources and have the ability to be, those resources have the ability to be expanded. And in addition, short-term to cash flow and exploration upside. So we were sort of looking for, hit all the buttons. And what we found is this project just outside Noranda, Quebec, and it sort of hits all those boxes for us. So I'll just walk you through this. It's basically, we're seeing this project as a stepping stone to move ourselves rapidly into a cash flow position so that we can leverage the company into more asset acquisitions down the road. This disclaimer will be posted at any time. You can read through that. It's pretty standard. Summarize again, what we have is we wanted to build a company with a cash flow pipeline through the acquisition of advanced projects. We started, this is our first acquisition that we're working on. It's an option agreement combined with some claims that we staked. And it is a copper, zinc, silver, gold projects just outside Noranda, Quebec. It's about 55 kilometers by road to the Noranda smelter. The deposits, as you'll see when I get through into this, have expansion potential. Which we obviously plan to take a lot of exception to, and with great infrastructure as well nearby. So this project is in a good location where we can rapidly, because of its location, we can actually move very quickly into a cash flow situation. The project already has a bulk sample permit. It's been extensively drilled. There's positive metallurgical test reports on this project. It comes with 11 kilometers of favorable horizon with 5 other additional targets that we've drummed up for new discoveries. And we've got a combination of land. We own 100% of 800 hectares with historic copper silver mineralization. And adjacent to that, we've optioned a 58 square kilometer property. And this is the one that has 2 existing resources on it. So what we're focused on in this particular project is copper, zinc, and precious metals. And these are required for future growth, as everybody's well aware on this call. This sort of speaks a little bit to the metal demand. It speaks to copper, speaks to zinc uses not only in galvanizing but also in batteries. And I was scratching my head a bit, saying, where is zinc used in batteries? And of course, next thing I did is I was replacing some batteries in my house. I took a look at them, and sure enough, these were zinc carbon batteries. This commodity cycle that we all know, there's great demand for particularly copper out there and for zinc, but these we see as growing into the future as well. And we all know, if you're on this call and you know the mining space, there's been a massive underinvestment in this industry for pretty much the last 10 years. And so we're getting to very close to that sort of springboard point where people will realize that we're underinvested and that they need to be putting money into these projects. Why did we choose Noranda? Well, Noranda is a very famous historical mining camp in Canada. It's the host of numerous of these types of deposits, so they're very well known, very well studied. I've spent many years of my life exploring and drilling and delineating these types of deposits. On this diagram, you can see there's a chart up in the corner, and the two deposits that sit on the property that we're talking about, Magusi and PBA, are shown in this in sort of a comparison with the other deposits on the screen here, in the camp rather. PBA has actually seen production in the past from both Noranda and from another company called First Metals. Magusi is the project we're focusing on right now, and it is a development project with resources, with a 43101 resource that's been published, and we're taking a second look at this in a different light. Where is it located? I've said already that we're just outside Noranda, Quebec. You can see the project area here in the rectangle. The border between Ontario and Quebec just goes right down the middle of this diagram. So when I talk about infrastructure and proximity and the good location of this project, I want to emphasize that because we are within 150 kilometers of 3 different mills that would take this material for processing. And that's very important because really by eliminating the need for building our own mill and having our own tailings compound, that greatly alleviates cost pressure on this project and allows us to actually move this thing forward rapidly. It'll basically be like a quarry operation. Here's a cross section of this deposit. This is the Magusi. I mean, it's one of many cross sections. It's approximately 250 meters to 300 meters in strike length across it. But this one here sort of depicts what we're doing with this project and how we're thinking about it a little bit differently. The existing Magusi resource, as you can see on the side here, shows it's broken into sort of 2 zones, a copper and a zinc-rich zone. Now, this was done with the intention of going underground. So when the resource was calculated, they were trying to basically maximize the high grade. And what that does, of course, as most people know, is that it reduces the tonnage that you're actually going to mine. So we've got a small, high-grade underground potential, which has got higher grades, as I said, or you could take a look at things differently, which is what we're doing with this project. From surface down to 200 meters, there's approximately 2 million tons of mineralized material that can be open pitted. And we think the better way to go after this project, as opposed to going down deep on it with an underground ramp and starting to mine at 400 meters deep and then work your way up, we are going to take the approach of an open pit so we get to cash flow very early on this project. And if you can see here, the coloration of this, which isn't the greatest, I will admit, anywhere from about $120 up to over $350 per ton. Rock is sitting on this in this deposit, which can be accessed by open pit. And that's the route that we're going to take. This is the same deposit, and we've just spun it around 90 degrees. So now we're looking at the plane of the deposit where all the drill holes pierce into it. Our plan on this project is very simple. There's quite a lot of drilling on this, as you can see, with all these black dots around it. And this is the resource that's been outlined in the past. And what we will do with this resource is come in and do some particularly close infill drilling on the resource. We want to tighten this up and do some drilling in this gap here that hasn't been completed yet. And we also want to drill around the bottom of this thing to see the extent. The reason for that is what we can do is very rapidly delineate the exact outline of the open pit that we intend to mine and get to that early cash flow. The second part that what we will focus on with this drill program that we're doing is getting detailed metallurgical drill holes right from the top of the deposit, which we can send into a lab such as Lakefield Research, SGS, for more mineral processing work. I mentioned at the outset that there's already a positive study has been done on this. So we know that this deposit can make a very good copper concentrate and a very good zinc concentrate that would be in demand for smelters. So what we want to do is we want to take that a step further, delineate this deposit, get more drill core for testing. We've got a number of questions that we have from that work that we just want to clarify. None of them are critical or critical path. They're just more like optimization type questions. And in doing so, we want to prepare this project for a bulk sample. And once we get through this metallurgical work, we can move directly into the bulk sample. And once that's completed, then we'll be ready to move to a production process. So this whole process, we have a very clear idea of what we need to do. We know what the work outline needs to be, and we're ready to take this project on and move it into a cash flow situation. Once we're doing that and in that process, we obviously can initiate permitting. We can initiate or advance the offtake discussions that we've had. I mentioned that there was three different processing facilities that are interested in this material. So we'll obviously take that to the next step with those folks. And the whole idea of the bulk sample would be that we know that a processing facility is going to want to get a decent size tonnage of material to test through it. So the bulk sample would be in the order of probably 25 to 35 thousand tons rather. The last thing that we want to do is, when we're drilling in this round, is we want to start testing some of the deeper parts of this deposit, because what happens is you can see that there's a rather large volume at surface, but then it starts to narrow down and get narrower. But what happens there is that at depth, the copper grade starts to increase dramatically in this deposit. As you can see, there's potential for it to go quite deep here, and this is based on downhole geophysics interpretations. And so over the course of time, we want to drill this further, because our plan would be first the open pit, and then develop the underground for basically ramping down from the pit into this deeper part and start extracting the high-grade copper. One intercept in this deposit, it's this lowest one down here, runs approximately 3.5% copper over about 8 meters. So we know that there's good copper grades down below, and we want to go after that. In addition to, now this is the Magusi project, and that's our focus, which is the sort of, path number one, which is let's get to cash flow as fast as we can, and let's get developing this project, this deposit. The second part is other exploration on this property. And it's an old saying from Noranda, you look for other deposits under the shadow of a head frame. Well, we don't have a head frame because we're going to be looking at pitting here, but we are in a favorable environment for these types of deposits, which are called VMS. They're kind of like those black smokers that you see on National Geographic on the bottom of the seafloor. So as you can imagine, they occur in clusters, and that's what we're seeing here. We already know that there's a deposit called Faby Bay, which has been at this point largely mined out. It needs work, but we'll defer that to the future. And Magusi, as we've been talking about, digging into the old files, and this was going into old dusty old paper files from the 1960s and 70s. We looking at the data, we realized that there are also 2 other pretty high priority targets that are existing on this horizon. This would be the favorable horizon across here, and they need some work. Now they're a little bit deeper. We need to refly the airborne geophysics for deeper penetration, and we need to kind of take a look at these things in a little bit longer stepwise. But either one of these could be another massive sulfide deposit related to these 2 areas. And if any of you remember the company Ore Resources that was run by a gentleman named Jim Gill, they basically started their company and with a similar approach. They had a deposit called Luvem. They went into where that deposit was. They started exploring around. They started following the system deeper, and lo and behold, they came across the Louvecourt deposit, which really became the company maker for Ore Resources. On this property also, we have a couple of conductors that have actually, believe it or not, never been tested. And in this terrain, one thing that we've noticed is that there are no false conductors. So far, every serious conductor that's been drilled has hit some kind of mineralization or alteration. So we're hopeful that these 2 conductors could, be the easy target that everybody didn't bother drilling, and we took an extra look at it and put some holes into it and come up with something. So those will be additional exploration targets. And then up in this corner, Moose Lake, basically, based on our review of all the data from this project to hear the Magusi and Fabian and the data along this horizon from past drilling, we recognize that there's a definite correlation of copper and silver in this systems here. And sure enough, when we were digging through some old files, and this work goes back to the 1950s and 1960s. So this has hardly been looked at all, just kind of like an abandoned corner of Quebec here. There's a bunch of trenching, and we'll come to that later, where there's very high grade copper and silver has been found in trenches. There's been very, very little follow-up work on that whatsoever. So we plan to make this an important part. It'll be longer term, getting in there, because we have to start from scratch. We have to fly LiDAR. We have to get boots on the ground and probably do some trenching, mechanical trenching, to look at the geology here, and then drill that. But each one of these is a very high prospective potential target on this property, in addition to the known resources at Magusi and Fabi Bay. This one here, sorry. This is basically sort of a block cartoon diagram talking about how these formed. It's kind of like a geological model that we're more or less following. But basically, we'll follow this and follow our nose like good prospectors have to be, but at the same time have a very disciplined approach to the exploration, using all the techniques and technologies that are available these days: geochemistry, geophysics, lithology, comparisons, etc. So we definitely know how to approach these deposits, and we want to move forward with these as rapidly as possible. The team is fairly highly experienced. Myself, I've been a geologist for a long time. I spent almost 20 years in the mineral exploration and development side of the business. I was with the last 10 were with Falconbridge. I've also worked with companies who are all gone now, actually. They're all gone now that I look at it. Kid Creek, Esso Minerals, Harbinson, Texasgulf, which made the huge discovery over in Timmins of the Kid Creek mine. And I guess the only one that's still around is Norilsk Nickel. So I had spent some time in Russia looking at all the operations of Norilsk Nickel in attempting to come up with a joint venture agreement with them on a production exploration agreement. Subsequent to my exploration and development days, I jumped ship and got into the investment side of the business as a mining analyst and an investment banker, raising funds for mining companies all over the world. And that was with Jennings Capital, which I was a co-founder of the Toronto operations, and worked with that company for about 13 years. Doug Harris, CFO, he's got a lot of experience as well. He's worked with numerous companies, highly experienced in M&A, and as well as in valuations. Now, Paul Negrel, he's our VP Exploration. Paul has also 30 years of nickel, copper, and copper zinc experience all over the world, actually. We first met at Falconbridge 35 years ago. And he's a well-seasoned, well-experienced geologist, very, very clever man. We have an independent board as we sit here right now, both respect to capital markets experience, basically finance experience through Shamiz. He's the CFO of a New York Stock Exchange listed company, and Samir Biswas, who is an independent director, is actually president of not India Zinc. I apologize. It's actually India Metals is what his firm is. India Zinc is a rather large company. So we've got a good team. We've got some space to add to that, especially when we start to move towards more of the mining side of this project. There are a number of people that are, in the loop with me that are looking at this and would come on board at the right time once we get things rolling here. So there's no shortage of people that would like to get involved with this project, and we've been talking to them and getting advice along the way. Moving along, here's the recommended program that we're trying to raise funds for. So what we're looking at is a raise of between 3.5 and 5.5 million. And we could do it and break it down into two phases, but the breakdown is as follows. We need approximately $1.5 million hard dollars for various parts of the operation and for option payments, et cetera, to get us moving forward in G&A, marketing, permitting, all that sort of stuff. The range then is $2 to $4 million in flow through. And these surveys and this work program is basically laid out to allow us to do one or the other. So if we raise 3.5 million, we'll basically complete what we call phase one. And if we were able to raise both, then we can go to, phase 1 and 2, explore the property as I was describing above with those 5 targets, do that rapid advancement and resource delineation and met test work drilling and the deeper copper testing work on the Magusi deposit. So in an ideal world, we'd be able to get $5.5 million done and move this project forward very aggressively for the next 12 to 18 months. Again, with the eye on getting to production as soon as possible. That's the breakdown there. Here's where we are at this point. We have raised private capital, which got us basically the option agreement signed. It got us data compilation completed. We got our 43-101 filed and got us through our audits. We're just wrapping up the 2022 audit at this point, which will go in with our filing statement probably sort of towards the end of next week. The first week of April is our sort of deadline for that, and I think we're on track for that at this point. So here's where we are right now. We're sort of at the go public and financing process. The work, the drilling is laid out here. Follow-up min processing work, revised the resource estimates at Magusi over here, and then we've got the, we've just flow seamlessly as we keep moving this project forward through permitting, mining engineering, and also community relations and consultation, baseline studies, that sort of thing. Finally get the bulk sample moving forward and basically make a decision to move this into a production situation. Again, with 3 processing facilities that are interested in this material, which sort of speaks to the fact that, there is a shortage of material these days out there, good base metals projects. We believe that this will, as far as we can take it, and as long as we keep getting it financed, we can move this into production relatively smoothly. Just as by way of history, on this property, the PBA project, which I've already mentioned, had some production. In 2006, a company called First Metals took that project on, and in 15 months, they went from a standing start to in production and rather the other way around, permitted and in production. So we're giving ourselves about 3 years to get through all the permits, which we'll obviously focus on as we're moving this project forward. So that's the plan here. Again, here's the offering. It's Electro Metals. The ticker, of course, we don't have one at this point. There's no market for the shares. We do have an LOI signed with a shell company. It's called Shinebox Capital, which is listed on the TSX Venture. Our target date, these, I'm not really allowed to say what we think our target date is, but we're putting the pedal to the metal to complete this and have this done in the first half of this year. So we want to obviously get boots on the ground and get working on this project. We would love to get this thing all done. Sorry, I thought I turned that off. We'd love to get this done by the end of June so that we can get moving forward. I've already talked about how we would structure the financing and the pricing. We're looking at, on the hard dollars, 30 cents for a share and a half warrant, and the 2 to 4 million would be flow through shares. And we're pricing, I don't have a price on that. And the main reason, of course, is because we're looking at both regular flow through and charity flow through. And once we sort of get that firmed up, which way we're going to go and how we're going to do that, then we can basically put the pin in the pricing on that. So at this point, we're basically out talking to people and looking at ways to structure the flow through. Use of proceeds, I've already said, at the risk of repeating myself: resource drilling, exploration, mine plan reevaluation, etc. I've said that we are a company that wants to acquire other projects that are near production, so we can, and I've obviously got a strong background in M&A, having done that for a number of years in the investment banking world. So we are always looking for projects that we can get involved in that can take us into a near-term production situation. And obviously our focus, as I've said, is copper, zinc, which we're doing right now, but also nickel copper, which is obviously a great metal. And with my Falconbridge background and Paul's Falconbridge background, it's kind of a natural for us to take a look at. This one here speaks to our capital structure. We currently have about 33 million shares outstanding. We have a fair number of warrants, 13 million warrants. The average strike price on those is close to 25.5 cents. We've got over on this side, it kind of shows the structure. So management and insiders own about half of the shares. And we've got some institutional investors, small institutional investors, as well as retail investors. So far, the company has raised about $2.6 million. And if we were to get all of those warrants exercised, that would bring in another 4 million, which which would be extremely helpful. And of course, we are attaching warrants to this financing as well. So we will have ability to tap existing shareholders down the road for additional funds if we need it. That's pretty well wraps up that one. Yep. In this one here, I just want to bring your attention to the following, and this is how we are sitting with respect to our peer group. This one here is based on the copper and zinc equivalent grades. This one here is probably more relevant, and what we're talking about here is the market cap per pound of copper or zinc. So as you can see, we're not the cheapest, we're not the most expensive, we're not in the middle, we're towards the well-valued price end of the spectrum. In summary, we've got a great location that allows us to move forward as we want. We've got development and exploration upside, and we have an experienced management team. And I see Sophie's showing up here, so I'm thinking that I'm probably at my limit.
No, it's great. I actually, one of the things that I did want you to touch on, because it's so important when going public and being, in this space, is the fact that you do have such an experienced management team, and you yourself come with, a very diverse background in this industry, which I think is a huge plus to this story.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hopefully that all of that comes to play, and that we can get this moving forward and use all of our collective experience on this to really create some value for our shareholders. That's really what we were trying to do here. Yeah.
Excellent. And so if this is your last slide, I'm gonna just get you with questions right now. Oh,
yep. Okay,
perfect.
That's good. Yeah, we can jump to this other stuff if they want. Yep, for sure.
Okay, excellent. So again, great story. And as I mentioned, I'm so impressed with your team. When you're talking about the current property that you're going public with, I think I saw somewhere that it was optioned. Do you own that 100%? Is it optioned? What's the situation exactly?
Right. Actually, that was the slide that I just popped it away. Actually, we probably could have put that one back up and looked at it. It's an option agreement with a company that most people are probably familiar with called Globex Mining. It's run by a fellow named Jack Stock, and it is an option agreement. And we have to spend over the 4 years from today to get this into a production situation. There's just about $6 million in option payments due. They're back-ended strongly to the end. So the last payment is $4 million out of that total. And there is a work commitment of $12 million, which is in line with what we think the expenditures will be. It's obviously we're going to spend more than 12 to get this into production, but those are the two major commitments on this as well. We have to issue some shares to Globex as well. And there's a royalty attached to it, which we can buy out at some.
Okay. And what's the royalty at?
The royalty is 3%.
Okay.
And it's gross metal royalty. I want to point that out to people. It's gross metals royalty, which I complained vociferously about. But because I don't want to be the poster child for gross metal royalties.
Yeah.
However, when I did a recalculation, the delta on that is there's not much of a big difference between a net smelter royalty and a gross metal royalty in this situation. And we do have I did negotiate a buyout of that royalty with Jack as well.
Excellent. So then I guess it would be safe to say, I mean, now, yes, you're an explorer, but the plan is to move to be a miner, to be in production. Yeah,
absolutely. Yes, that's exactly what we're planning to do. I mean, well, of course, through my career, what I've noticed is that when a company has a project and then it sort of moves it into a production situation, that's more or less when the stock dies, right? People lose interest. It's all the engineering and the boring part of the story. So what we plan to do and what we will do is we will sort of move the Magusi project down its path towards a production situation, but we will keep exploring on the property. Because if we were able to come up with and this has happened many times in the past with various mining companies, we could be drilling and come up with an incredible intersection on one of these targets that are out there, which could change the entire complexion of the project. That's the sort of thing that we would like to try to succeed in doing. We think that, again, because this property has already shown that it's quite productive, having 2 known deposits on already and hints of 2 more. We're quite excited about the potential that this is. And it's it's part of the Noranda complex, but it's in an area that really hasn't received the amount of detailed exploration that the core of the Noranda camp has. So we believe that there is excellent potential here for finding more high grade, good quality company maker deposits.
Excellent. And so you touched on the infrastructure. So
Yep.
like excellent infrastructure, what's the drill season like? Like, is
Sure.
it, yeah, how far
Yeah,
are you
well,
from
it's-
the other,
Sure. So
No,
we
yeah.
can, I mean, you know, it's typical of the Canadian Shield, it's boggy. So, you know, you prefer to do your drilling in the winter if you can. However, as it turns out, where the Magusi deposit sort of subcrops that surface and where we're going to be focusing a lot of drilling, it's believe it or not, it's on a sort of a higher little ridge, and the overburden is not quite as thick. So we will be able to start drilling into that right away. In terms of access, we've got there's a highway that goes 2/3 of the way, and then the rest of it is a gravel road that we would have to do some maintenance on it. There's a couple of, you know, culverts and things like that we got to take a look at. But in terms of access, it's perfectly accessible. And as I was saying, we're about 150 kilometers at max from the furthest mill that we could use to process the material, and other ones are much more local to us. So we've got three choices. We'll look at the economics, do a stress test, figure out which is the best way to do things. But we have three hungry mills that would want to take our feed from us. We've had good discussions with all three.
So then that brings me actually to your bulk sample. I have a couple of questions for that.
Sure.
So what's the permitting like to get the permitting for the bulk sample?
Right. So there already is an existing permit to take a bulk sample, and it's up to 50,000 tons.
Perfect.
And now that was an underground bulk sample. So we will have to basically take that permit and make some adjustments to it that will allow us to take the surface sample.
Okay. And so then that 25 to 35,000 tons that you're going to be doing the bulk sample with, you'll be taking that to one of the mills to process. I'm assuming once you get an agreement with one of them.
Right. Well, what we'll do is we'll actually, depending on the outcome of our previous step, right, which is the drilling, to get some drill core to take the next step with, say, Lakefield or SGS.
Okay.
Once we sort of get through that step, we'll probably parse this up to see what the three different processing facilities come up with, and then figure out what their terms will be for us. And then we'll select the best of the terms that we can get from that. Because I know one of them in particular, the process that they use does not really get the precious metals, recover the precious metals as well as some of the other ones. So we want to basically do that trade-off and understand what's going on.
And so then is there an expectation for revenue through that bulk sample, or is it going to be more of a testing phase?
There'll be a little bit of revenue, but won't be a whole lot.
Okay.
Yeah, and to the extent that I haven't actually calculated what that will be. So it's a little ways to go.
Perfect. And then I guess another question that we had here was, are there any Indigenous groups involved or consultation going on? What's the situation like?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't started any consultation at this point, but I mean, that's a huge part of our, you know, culture of our company, that we will have. Clearly, we will be consulting with not only the First Nations, but also local communities around. I mean, it's just what you do.
Yeah.
There are no sort of claims on this land at all. There's been already some past production off of this sort of general area. So it's more like a brownfields region. But we will be very carefully and respectfully talking to all the groups and everybody that's involved, actually.
Okay, excellent. Paul, did you have a question or two that you wanted for Daryl?
A couple, yeah. How deep are you going to drill in this first wave of drilling, or your first drill program? How deep do you expect to go?
Oh, right. Okay. So there's a variety of drilling. So on the delineation type drilling, that we'll put up a grid, and it's going to be survey based, but we basically are going to drill a number of holes, I think in the order of 40 or so holes that will be approximately 45 meters deep each. So those will be vertical holes right in a grid, very tight grid, right in the top of the deposit. And that'll be for the bulk sample, or the sort of advanced metallurgical test work from drill core. And then with the delineation of the drilling, we'll be drilling down maximum to about, like, hole length, probably about 350 meters. But the bulk of those will be 200 to 250 meters. Those shallow exploration targets, the A and B conductors, those will be quite shallow holes. So we'll probably drill 6 holes in 900 meters, so like 150 meters each. And then the other two holes, the other two targets on this favorable horizon, the east and west targets that we call them, they're deeper. So they would probably be in the order of like 800 meters or over 800 meters deep. So we've got indications from past drilling of evidence of a hydrothermal system in both areas. And they just basically, the guys gave up. The technology wasn't good enough 35 years ago to continue exploring. So we plan to go back into those two areas with modern borehole geophysics and lay out some loops and really start probing hard for some big base metal projects or deposits there.
The historical data that you've shown on a couple of the slides, the percentages of copper were 3% and above.
Yeah,
I mean, that's good grades. That's good percentages.
There's some.
Is that norm for the area, or is that exceptional, or?
No, I mean, those what you get in the typically in these types of deposits, they're quite varied and they zone quite a bit. And there are some assays, individual assays that we've gotten back that are as high as 30% zinc and as high as 22% copper. So we know that there are some real interesting high grade hits through this. And actually, one of the interesting things we've noticed is that as more holes, the more holes that are drilled, the higher the grade gets. So what we think is that there's a lot more of these sort of high grade sort of sub lenses through this deposit that are zoned that can give us much more metal grade. And there's also a cross structure that this is one of the things that we want to examine. I don't think anybody's bothered to look at it, but from the data, we sort of see there's some kind of a high grade trend, quite high grade gold, silver, zinc and copper crossing this deposit. And so we're not going to spend too much time, but we're going to make sure that we know where it is and flag it so that when we come to the open pit itself, we'll be aware that there's this high grade zone. We don't want to lose that. We're talking about assays as high as 10 grams gold and 100 to 180 grams of silver and zinc grades that are, well north of 10% and copper equivalent equally high in the order of 2-3% up there as well.
I have one final question and we're going to let you go. What do you need on site to do a bulk sample? Do you need a crusher? Like, how do you process the mineral when it comes out to do the bulk sample and then ship it to your 3 labs or your 3?
Exactly. So we will set that up with a mobile crusher, and we've already looked in the costs of renting those for the time period that we need. So we would put in obviously, and we also need to have drill hole blasting equipment, drill hole. Hole drilling, drill rigs to drill the holes, and to blast and also to crush, right? So we will be taking care of all those on site. And then we will have some contracted truckers to take it off site and move it. And we will set up for that. And we'll probably run gen sets for that part of the project. I didn't mention, but there's already 3-phase power that comes right to the edge of the property, right to the gate of the property that's basically live. It just has to be turned on again by Quebec Hydro. And so once we get going on the property, we'll just really put in a substation and basically run all that through the Quebec Hydro grid. But for the near term, we'll look at gen sets.
If you don't mind, Daryl, we have one question from Frank Krushek, and I'll let him come on and ask.
Hi, Frank.
Frank, if you, I guess take off your mic, you'll be able to ask the question yourself.
Right, you're on mute there, Mike, or Frank, rather.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Well, I'm from Duparquet, worked at Beatty Mines, Lyndhurst Mine back in the 50s.
Right.
At Magusi Lake, we used to fish, and you mentioned all these words. I came in just about 10 minutes ago, so I missed your presentation, but does that make, I Jack Stock, talked to him at the Prospectors. I understand you're working with him.
Yep.
So, but these grades are outstanding. Where are you?
Yeah, I mean, this is the Magusi project. It was originally called the
The Magusi River, is it near there?
Yeah, it is, exactly. It's just north of the Magusi River. Yeah.
Well, I used to fish there back in the 40s.
Yeah, well, we'll make sure that we kind of keep that protected for you.
Okay, thank
I
you.
don't know if there's any fish left in there, but
That's
we'll
true
do our
too.
best.
Thanks, Frank.
Yeah, thanks.
You know Du Parquet then, eh?
Yep.
Okay, well, that's where I lived.
Oh, yeah, great. Yeah, actually, I was just talking to a driller that it lives in Du Parquet or very close by. So we were just discussing, contract.
Okay, but there was a lot of problems with arsenic there.
Yeah, I understand that. It comes out of the, are you talking about the arsenic from the
Arsenopyrite.
smelter?
There are arsenopyrites. There's the big smokestack still there at the roaster there. I think it's still there.
Yeah, it is. There's two issues then. One is that there's a lot of arsenopyrite in the gold deposits that are on the north side of where we are, on the north side of Du Parquet Lake. So that's one issue with respect to the gold deposits. But then the smelter has had, it was kind of famous. The Horn smelter would take lots of different feed material. And so that's where the other anomaly of arsenic is in the Noranda area. This deposit, we've run metal tests, a whole suite of metal tests on these ores, very clean, no deleterious metals whatsoever in this. So they're very good, straight copper, zinc, silver, gold. So we don't have cadmium. We're not seeing elevated arsenic at all. Very clean.
So actually, Frank and Daryl will be with us at our next 5 à 7 cocktail, which is next Wednesday, April 5th. So if you're there, you'll be able to speak to Daryl about it in person.
Sure.
So I think that about wraps it up for us today, gentlemen.
Great. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for hosting it, Paul and Sophie, and for people that took the time to listen in. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll see you next Wednesday.
Yep. See you then.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.